is not really a Govardhana fast day. Today is actually the official day of Gundica Marjanam. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I think it's more or less the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Cleaning of the Gundica temple. You know, I wasn't here, but they had the bathing ceremony, Lord Jagannath, Snan Yatra. Actually, the Snan Yatra was actually the birthday, it's the appearance day of Lord Jagannath. So on that auspicious full moon day, on Jagannath's appearance day, we know that Lord Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra, they take their public bath. And we know that the first bathing ceremony took place, millions of years ago in the Satyuga. And at that time, Lord Jagannath personally instructed King Indradyumna that for 15 days after the bathing ceremony, no one should see the deities. And in the Narada Purana, it tells us how during that bathing ceremony of Lord Jagannath, Dev and Subhadra, they actually catch a cold. They get a fever due to exposure to the cool winds. So to recuperate, they remain in seclusion for 15 days. This is their transcendental pastime. And during that time, they're offered medicines, fruit juices and herbs and roots and ginger lemon drinks. And in Jagannath Puri, during this time of seclusion, they repaint the deities. And so after 15 days in seclusion, Lord Jagannath and Baladev and Subhadra, they reappear before their loving devotees, dressed in their finest robes and ornaments, one day before Rath Yatra. So on that morning of Rath Yatra, thousands of people, they gather together, because in Jagannath Puri they have like a whole culture of serving and loving Jagannath. And so they all gathered there. They haven't seen Lord Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra for 15 days. They're feeling intense separation. And therefore, just to get a glimpse of the deities as they emerge from their temple and placed on their carts, thousands of people gather early in the morning. And the carts, they're very heavy. Actually, in Jagannath Puri, they have 3 big carts. They're so heavy, it takes 500 people just to pull one cart. And the cart, they have to pull it 2 kilometers to the famous Gundica temple, where their lordship stays for 8 or 9 days. It's a transcendental pastime. They stay there, it said they stay there on vacation. They have a vacation. And on the 10th day, they return to the main temple. So this Gundica temple is surrounded by beautiful, lush gardens, tall, cooling coconut trees, beautiful, fragrant flowers, which creates this Vrindavan atmosphere. And the main temple of Jagannath is called Nilachala, due to its grandeur and opulence. It's compared to Dwarka. See, it's amazing because actually in Jagannath Puri, different people, they have different relationships with Jagannath. Some people worship Jagannath in awe and reverence, in grandeur, like in Vaikuntha, the Vaikuntha mood. And sometimes They worship him. Some devotees, they just have this relationship with Jagannath as cowherd boy, Shama Sundar, playing his flute in Vrindavan. So sometimes the deities, you'll find sometimes the deities are dressed in different costumes toward this different relationship with the devotees. It actually is said that sometimes Lord Jagannath is dressed in a pure gold ornaments, which weighs like 1 ton of pure gold. That's like real opulence. And sometimes they dress him just like a carrier boy, with the yellow turban and the chala. So this Gundica temple, it's compared to like Vrindavan. It creates an atmosphere of Vrindavan, and the main temple is called Chala. So during the Rath Yatra parade, the eager devotees, they're in this mood of the Brajavasis, begging Krishna to come back to Vrindavan with them as they pull the cart to Gundica. Because we know Krishna, he left Vrindavan. Then he went to Mathura, then he went to Dwarka, became king of the yogis. But he was separated from those Vrindavan devotees, those Brajavasis, for 100 years. As Prabhupada mentions, that the only business of Radharani and the gopis and Madhya Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj and cowherd boys and cows and calves is to simply think of Krishna and cry. There's this mood of separation. And actually in that mood of separation, they can feel Krishna's presence even more intensely than they could when he's personally present. So they're pulling. So at different times they used to go and visit Krishna from Vrindavan. Sometimes at Kurukshetra, other places. And they would tell Krishna, don't stay here, Krishna. We want you to come back to Vrindavan. We want you to come back. They don't want to see Krishna surrounded by soldiers and dressed in armor and carrying shields. They want to see Krishna in his Shama Sundara, cowherd boy form in Vrindavan, with his yellow dhoti and his peacock feather and his beautiful, in this beautiful setting of Vrindavan. So they want to bring Krishna back. So this is the mood of the Rath Yatra parade, is the Brajavasis begging Krishna, bringing Krishna, pulling the cart, bringing Krishna back to Vrindavan. So this is the mood, as they're pulling Krishna, they're pulling the cart from the Jagannath temple to Gundica. So as this Rath Yatra festival was approaching, Lord Chaitanya, he called Kashi Mishra. Now Kashi Mishra, he's the superintendent of the Gundica temple. So Lord Chaitanya, he approached him. And he also called Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And he begged permission to wash the temple of Gundica. So the superintendent, he said to Lord Chaitanya, my dear servant, we are all your servants. Whatever you desire, it is our duty to perform. Yet washing a temple is not the service befitting you. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if you wish to do so, it is to be accepted as one of your transcendental pastimes. So the superintendent, Kashi Mishra, he said, the king has given me a special order to do without delay whatever your lordships desire. So soon after, the superintendent, he delivered 100 water pots and 100 brooms for cleaning the Gundica temple. So early next day, Lord Chaitanya took his personal associates with him. And, at that time, in Jagannath Puri, it's really hot, very hot. So Lord Chaitanya, he personally smeared their bodies with sandalwood pulp. Sandalwood pulp cools the body down. And he gave each devotee a broom. Then he went to the Gundica temple. There was 100 devotees. and they were engaged in cleaning. And first they swept the temple with brooms, then the temple buildings, the area between the temple and the kirtan hall. And Lord Chaitanya wasn't just there orchestrating the cleaning, but he was personally cleaning just to instruct others. And during the cleaning, Lord Chaitanya and all the Vaishnavas were chanting the holy name in great jubilation. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, while they were cleaning. And as they were cleaning, Lord Chaitanya was shedding tears of love for Lord Jagannath. And even those, it said, even those tears were washing the temple. So following Lord Chaitanya's footsteps, all the devotees collected all the straw and the dust and the grains of sand in one place. Then they gathered it up in their cloth and threw it outside. But it is said that despite their sincere efforts, no one could collect as much dust, sand and straw as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was the best cleaner. Soon after sweeping all the floors and all the temple grounds, soon 100 men stood there, ready with filled water pots, simply waiting for the Lord's order to throw the water. And soon Lord Chaitanya called for the water. So first they washed the main temple, the ceilings, the walls also Jagannath's sitting place. Then it is said that some water, when they were doing the washing, it fell from the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. And one devotee, he raced in there and he drank that water. Someone else begged for that water. Another person was given that water in charity. Everyone was anxious to get the mercy. The transcendental water that touched the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. So after the water was let out through an outlet, Lord Chaitanya mopped the rooms. Then with his own cloth, with his chadar, he polished the throne. And soon the whole temple was clean and purified and cool and pleasing. During that cleaning, when Lord Chaitanya saw someone doing really nicely, working very hard, he praised him. But if he saw someone not working to their full capacity, he immediately chastised that person. Not bearing any grudges. They also washed the area where the food was kept, the kitchen, the entire yard, raised sitting places, every other room. After everything was thoroughly washed, one Vaishnava came and he poured water. He purposely came and poured water on the Lord's feet and drank that water. However, Lord Chaitanya was not happy. He called for Sarup Damodar. Lord Chaitanya told him, just see the behavior of this devotee. He has washed my feet within the temple of the Lord. Not only that, he has also drunk that water. I do not know what reaction I will incur because of this offence. Indeed, this devotee has greatly implicated me. So this way, Lord Chaitanya was angry externally in order to establish the proper etiquette. That one must follow very strictly the rules and regulations in regards to serving the Lord in the temple, in the duty of worship. So outside, the gateway of the temple was washed. Even the roads, all the roads leading into the temple were washed. So, Lord Chaitanya, as the world teacher, he was teaching us by this pastime how one should receive Lord Krishna within one's cleansed and pacified heart. That if one wants to see Krishna seated in one's heart, one must first cleanse the heart. Especially in this age of Kali, everyone's heart is unclean. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya especially recommend that everyone chant this Hare Krishna mantra and hear about the Lord's glories. Therefore, devotees, they have to cleanse the heart. They have to cleanse the heart, just as Lord Chaitanya cleansed the Gundica temple. In this way, one can be pacified and enriched in devotional service. So, if the heart is filled with, straw and dirt and sand, such as lust and greed and envy and pride, one cannot enthrone the Lord. The heart must be cleansed of all material motives, such as mentioned in the Shastras, as a desire for material enjoyment, material opulence, also in personal liberation, to desire to become one with the Lord, also a desire for name, fame, high position. So even though one may cleanse the heart, sometimes some desires again come into being within the heart. Because we carry all these subtle desires, we carry this material contamination even from previous lives, so the contamination goes very deep. So one must continuously be cleansing the heart for one's whole lifetime. Through hearing and chanting, serving the deities, eating Krishna Prasada, associating with devotees. So just to teach us this, Lord Chaitanya actually cleansed the temple for a second time. And this second cleansing was even more thorough, with firm conviction than even the first cleaning. So similarly, one must endeavour with patience and enthusiasm and determination to throw out all these, what they call the stumbling blocks on the path of devotional service. So in Bhakti Yoga, or Krishna consciousness, we learn the importance of purifying and refining our consciousness as much as possible, avoiding and freeing ourselves from all the negative influences that pervade this modern world. This is an important stepping stone, you could say, in reclaiming our freedom, so we can live in our sacred space, free from material consciousness. A lot of people are reaching out for this freedom in this day and age. But a lot of people, they don't realize that real freedom means freedom from material consciousness, freedom from lust and greed and anger and envy and all these things. So we have to free ourselves from this material consciousness and awaken fully and nourish our spiritual love and devotion. Then we can pass it on to others in our preaching activities. However, if we're not careful, if we're not sincerely practicing our sadhana, chanting our rounds, etc., what happens is the mind and the intelligence and the false ego and the senses can bewilder us and put us in illusion. Make us think that this material world and ourselves are separate from the Lord, and the ultimate goal is simply to enjoy this material body and this world independently. So this bewilderment and illusion and covering of consciousness, as I said, has been going on for many lifetimes. So taking up the genuine spiritual path means trying to purify the consciousness so we can transform our perceptions and our attitudes and fully understand the purpose behind this wonderful creation, which is to develop our love and understanding of Krishna and to get out of this material world, go back to our real home, in Garuda. So on one hand, we have to be very practical about techniques for keeping ourselves pure. We have to chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, reading the scriptures, always eating prasadam, associating with devotees. On one hand, we have to be very careful, we have to be very sincere and determined to practice this process which Krishna's and Srila Prabhupada's given us. But on the other hand, we have to be humble and understand that material contamination is an ever-present reality. Because we're not pure devotees. And therefore we must learn how to cope with it. We have to use our intelligence, we have to use our brains to rise above it. It's said that every day, we're at war with Maya. This very powerful, deluding material energy, who, like a very clever thief, is going to try and steal away our most valuable asset, our Krishna consciousness. However, if we take full share of Krishna and Krishna consciousness, we'll ultimately be victorious. It's just like Arjuna. We're also sitting on a chariot, a material body. And who's sitting right next to us? It's Krishna's disciple. He's right there. It's like Krishna is sitting on the chariot next to Arjuna. So, if we take full share of Krishna and Krishna consciousness, we'll ultimately be victorious, just like Arjuna. For Krishna, he will surely help us. But he'll only help us to the degree that we're willing to take shelter of him. Therefore, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, we must learn this great art and science, how to take shelter of Krishna. So this cleansing of the Gundica temple was conducted by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to let us know how the heart should be cleansed and soothed to receive Lord Krishna, and enable him to sit within our heart without any disturbance. Lord Chaitanya also, he cleansed the Srinagar temple, which is situated near the Gundica temple. And finally, Lord Chaitanya and the devotees, they rested for a short time. Then they began chanting and dancing, big kirtan. And Lord Chaitanya said he was dancing so ecstatically as he was compared to a mad lion. He was perspiring and trembling, roaring in jubilation. Tears were just shooting out of his eyes, out of his lotus eyes, drenching all the devotees in the kirtan. And when he jumped up and down, it said the earth shook. So after chanting and dancing ecstatically for some time, Lord Chaitanya, he stopped the kirtan. Then he and all the devotees assembled the devotees, they took rest. Then they bathed in a nearby lake. Then after they sat down in the garden, under the shade of the trees there, soon the superintendent, Kashi Mishra of the Gundica temple, he came with the carts, the bullock carts, with his huge feast. Rice and vegetable preparation, so many varieties of savouries and sweets. And when Lord Chaitanya saw the big feast assembled before the devotees, he was very satisfied. He smiled. At that time, Lord Chaitanya, he knew, Krishna himself, he knows everything. He knows what types of preparation each devotee likes best. Therefore, he had Swarup Garuda deliver these preps to each devotee to their full satisfaction. And then Lord Chaitanya said, you can just give me ordinary mixed green vegetables, just some shak. You may deliver the rest of this opulent food to the devotees. However, out of the devotees' intense desire to want to serve Lord Chaitanya, when opulent Jagannath Prasad was put on the Lord's plate, sometimes by tricks or sometimes by force, the Lord accepted it out of affection for his devotees. So after taking their lunch, all the Vaishnavas stood up and they began another big ecstatic kirtan. It said it just filled the upper and lower planetary systems. They were like chanting and dancing. They must have spiritual bodies, after a big feast, you can imagine. So after this, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered flower garlands and sandalwood pulp to all the devotee personal associates. And of course the next day, it marked Lord Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra returning after their 15 days of seclusion, recuperating from their cold and fever. So that's this day. Actually it's called Nava Yogana Day, a day of fresh youthfulness. And they're dressed in their finest robes and ornaments one day before Rathayatra. So during those 15 days of seclusion, as I said, everyone was so unhappy for they couldn't see their beloved Lord Jagannath. Now upon seeing him once again, I was so happy. And then another Yogana day. So early next morning, before Rathayatra, as I said, thousands of people started gathering, but also Lord Chaitanya and his intimate associates, they go to the temple to see this special ceremony where Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra, they leave their altar and mount their transcendental chariots. Actually, it said that Lord Chaitanya was so thirsty to see the form of Lord Jagannath that his eyes became like two bumblebees drinking the honey from the lotus eyes of Lord Jagannath. And although tears began to flow from his lotus eyes, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu checked those tears so they wouldn't disturb him seeing the beautiful face of Lord Jagannath. He was so deeply absorbed in seeing his beloved Jagannath, as he has said, he simply forgot everything. Therefore, he said that in Jagannath Puri, we find two crying forms of the Lord. We have Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the mood of Srimati Radharani. He's crying for Krishna. And Lord Jagannath is Krishna crying for Radharani. So they say in Jagannath Puri, there's two crying forms of the Lord. So I think the Gundica Marjanam is scheduled for Saturday. Is it like a Saturday? And other things been going on over 2 weeks. And usually we see they do a big cleaning in the altar room. People get right up on top of the canopies and they clean up there all the dust and dirt that accumulates, and buckets of water we'll see come flying out from the bottom into the temple, and it's a special opportunity. Also, some devotees, they can get absorbed in cleaning the ashrams and cleaning the houses, cleaning the car, just making everything sparkling clean. And actually you feel, it's incredible actually, when you really get into cleaning, you really feel, actually, there's one conversation about it said, as you clean the temple, you clean your heart. But you feel really purified actually, just by cleaning and keeping everything nice. It's a part of our Bhakti Yoga process, the internal cleansing and the external cleansing. External cleansing is keeping everything clean, keeping the clothes clean and the house clean and the room clean, everything nice and tidy and clean. And then the internal cleanliness, cleansing the heart through the chanting, the reading the transcendental literatures, and eating prasada. It's a transcendental process where we completely purify our entire existence. And then that golden throne in our heart becomes a very fit place for Krishna to reside. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Gundica Marjanam ki, Sri Prabhupada ki. Sing that. Go ahead.
What's the Gundica temple when there's not Jagannath and co coming to the temple?
I'm not sure actually. I think they actually have a regular temple. I think I read about it, but I just can't quite remember. I think it's but there's I think there's a regular. They have deities there. Has he been there, Maharaj?
I think there is some worship going on.
Yeah. Because you know, they probably I mean they have the deities from the Jagannath temple. And I forgot to mention actually just while the deities were there when they come off the cart after the Rathiyaja festival and they go into the Gundica temple and they put them on the altars there. Lord Chaitanya and his associates, they stay there for those 9-10 days, just doing ecstatic kirtan every day in the temple, But it's, I know we went to Jagannath Puri, and it's an amazing place because there's like 30,000 people that live in that town of Jagannath Puri, and they're all involved in serving Jagannath. It's amazing. They have they have this huge kitchen with like 160 burners going. It's all wood fire. Everything's cooked in beautiful clay pots. With wood fire, everything's cooked in pure ghee. And they have like 500 cooks in there. I think it's like 200 chefs and 300 assistants. And they can feed like 10,000 people a day. And on festival days, some 30,000 people, 40,000 people. And it's a whole culture of Jagannath there. And it's something the kids learn when they grow up. Actually, every family, like I said, 30,000 people engaged in the service of Jagannath. You think, how is that? What do they imagine trying to accommodate 30,000 people serving the deities here? But we have some people, their whole family tradition, which goes back hundreds of years, generations. They make the milk. They have the cows that produce the milk for cooking for Jagannath. Another family, they produce the wood for burning the fires. Another family is growing vegetables. Another family, they're growing rice, wheat, spices. Other families, they're like generations of cart builders. And then there's the cart painters. And there's the people that make the beautiful clothes of Jagannath. And there's the people that make the gardens. And it's like a whole culture of worship and service to Jagannath that their children learn from their very young age to take on the family tradition and service, where they learn this love and devotion for Jagannath from a very young age. And there's so many amazing pastimes to Jagannath. Actually, they said, if you think that Jagannath is just a wooden statue or an idol, then he'll simply remain like that to you forever. And actually, it is said, and there's so many pastimes, that would show us that Jagannath is really there. It's Krishna, Sham. He said that real devotees, the Vaishnavas, they don't see the Jagannath form of the Lord. That's simple Jagannath, but they see Sham Sundara Krishna on the altar. And there's so many incredible pastimes connected to Jagannath. Lord Jagannath, he has a very playful mood. He performs many tricks and pastimes with devotees and the pujaris. And one of my favourite pastimes, I have to tell it, it's about this one guy, his name was Salavega. Now Salavega, he wasn't really a Vaishnava, but he was a Vaishnava, but he was born in a Muslim family. Actually, not even a Muslim family, he was part of a village which were considered untouchables. They're very, very low-class people that engage in a lot of simple activities. And therefore, they're not even allowed to come to the Jagannath temple. They're not allowed to come to the Rathayatra festival and pull the cart. This Salavega, he was a weaver by profession, but he had no education. But he used to sing beautiful songs about Jagannath. His love and devotion for Jagannath was just incredible. You know, during his Rathayatra festival, he would be hiding in a distant place, watching the festival. The tears would just flow from his eyes. You know, his love for Jagannath was just unbelievable. And so he always had this desire that he wanted to make an offering to Jagannath. But he knew I can't come to the temple and make an offering. But he lived about 30 kilometres actually from the temple. But he carried a big basket of mangoes. Oh, Jagannath. Carried this big basket of mangoes, like 30 kilometres. And he was sitting in the field out there, way a bit distant from the Jagannath temple, and he was doing the offering. At that time, some of the priests from the Jagannath temple were walking past. They saw him there, and they thought, oh, look at this untouchable. It appears he's making an offering to Jagannath. Oh, as if Jagannath's going to accept an offering from him. But then they noticed, suddenly, all those mangoes in the basket, they suddenly disappeared. And they went, oh no. And they ran to the temple. And they ran into the dairy room. And to their utter disbelief, they saw bits of mango pulp strewn all over the altar. And there was mango juice running down Jagannath's face. So there are many, many pastimes like this. Actually, that Salavega, he became a famous devotee, actually. They had a little, it's like a little window there in the Jagannath wall where they made it for him when he come and see Jagannath. I think it's still there. But there's been so many incredible pastimes like that, you know, where Jagannath reciprocated with the devotees and their pastimes. So
We have the Gundica, actually the temple remains empty.
Sorry?
The temple remains empty.
Oh, empty, okay, vacant. So they just had 10 days for the temple of the Shri Garuda